Why would a person from Sri Lanka go all the way to Serbia to work?
People cannot just come to Serbia. So to be able to come to Serbia, you need to have a job. You cannot come to a situation where you open a company yesterday and tomorrow you want to import 20 guys from Nepal.
Oni ne dolaze ovde da bi, kako se zove, živjeli na tuđ račun.
Ne.
Oni rade.
Oni rade. They're very cooperative, they're very easy to get along with. The biggest difference is food. They will tell me and I will tell you, and this is completely normal. You know, it's not that they're hiding something from you or going behind your back. It's just the way it works. It's a different mindset. They just generally bring a very positive atmosphere to any workplace where they come.
Welcome to our KSEL Talks podcast, where we discuss foreigners, business, law, and all things Serbia. In this episode, I have a very special guest who is engaged in something that, for me, is a bit of a flex for Serbia. This is something that I would 10, 15 years ago would consider something that is far beyond Serbia's capabilities and possibilities, but here we are. My guest today is Nikola Lazić, who has an employment agency in Sri Lanka and who actually has, by this time, imported hundreds of workers into Serbia. And frankly, I consider this fascinating because when I was a kid, this would be a completely alien concept. When I was a kid, workers went from Serbia to abroad, say Germany, Western Europe, and so on. But now we have a situation that is other people coming to Serbia to work. So please, can you introduce yourself to us and tell us why an employment agency, why Sri Lanka, and why Sri Lankans?
Hi, Andrea. Pleasure to be here. So I'm Nikola Lazić. I'm the owner of MONEVA Recruitment Agency in Colombo in Sri Lanka. And we've been working for 3 or 4 years now, helping employers from Serbia find adequate employees in Sri Lanka and helping the employees in Sri Lanka find adequate employment in Serbia. So what we do is we help with first finding employment here to our partners in Serbia. And then we help all the employees in Sri Lanka, the candidates, with all their paperwork, all the documentation, for them to safely and legally go to Serbia and start their new jobs there. The reason why I'm very bound to Sri Lanka is because I grew up there. I spent 10 years living in Sri Lanka. I went to school there. My mom has lived in Sri Lanka since the early 90s. My aunt, who I'm very close to, has also lived in Sri Lanka since the early 90s. She has citizenship. My sister was born in Sri Lanka. And I've been very attached to Sri Lanka my whole life, and my whole family. My grandparents live there. So, I mean, it really is a kind of second homeland for me. And that is the reason why my agency exclusively works with people from Sri Lanka, because I feel I know them best. I think that when I talk to employers in Serbia, I can vouch for people from Sri Lanka best. I understand them. I understand the people when they have problems. I understand when they come to me with their issues and concerns, and it's much easier for me to understand and address their problems than it will be for people who are strangers to me, like people from India or Nepal or many other countries where workers come from now.
Can you tell us, why would a person from Sri Lanka go all the way to Serbia to work?
People from Sri Lanka have been going to Serbia for a while now, so I'm not the first agent that started. There's others who started before me, but I must say that I was at the beginning of the trend. And now, since I've been working for these 3 or 4 years, Serbia has greatly increased in popularity in Sri Lanka, and it's very well known. The young people in Sri Lanka are very tech savvy. So they're very active on social media, they're active on WhatsApp groups, Facebook groups, TikTok. And so the concept of Serbia and living in Serbia is extremely well known to them. And there's quite a large Sri Lankan community here. So the people, when they come, I mean, I can't say they feel that they're at home, but it's not a completely strange land for them. The biggest reason why they're going is economic, as you would expect. The salaries in Sri Lanka are many factors smaller than they are in Serbia. And so for a person in Sri Lanka, it's a very good opportunity to go and to earn some money and send this money back home to help their families, invest, save up. And also, for many of them, it's a chance to start a new life in Europe. But mostly the reason they come is because they want to stay. And we've been noticing a trend with the workers that we've been sending to Serbia that hardly anybody is going back to Sri Lanka. They're really enjoying Serbia. We're having more and more requests for family visas. So people who are already here bringing their wives or their children or their husbands, to also join them in Serbia.
Usually what the concern is with migrants is whether they are a good cultural fit with the host country.
Yeah.
However, we talked a little bit and I get the impression that they're actually quite a good fit.
I think they're a great fit. I mean, the people from Sri Lanka, I had to describe them in a few words, they're happy, easygoing, they're not aggressive, they're very easy to get along with, they just generally bring a very positive atmosphere to any workplace where they come. I haven't had any concerns about Sri Lanka people who came from my agency having problems or getting into fights or arguments. It doesn't happen. So I think they're a great fit. I've been hearing great things from the employers who've been hiring them, because they know that in most of the companies where workers from our agency went, most of these employers hired many more workers, to the extent that where we had, for example, 4 workers at the beginning, we went up to 40. There's absolutely no problem there.
But tell me, so when we talk about Sri Lankans and their culture, well, let's say, what would they prevailing religions be? What is generally their culture? You said that they're, very peaceful and very...
They're very peaceful. So the vast majority of Sri Lankans are Buddhist. They have Hindu, Muslim, and Christian minorities. But even there in Sri Lanka, they had a very long civil war, which has been over for some 15, 20 years now. But I must say that even when I lived there, I never felt any ethnic tensions. I mean, there was no discrimination, or I never got the feeling that somebody got a different treatment, because he was a Muslim or he was a Christian or he wasn't part of the majority. But I think another great point that I missed, it's the level of education. So, for example, Sri Lanka has one of the highest literacy rates in the world. They have a fantastic education system. They have a fantastic social healthcare system. And generally, it's an easy country to live in. So they are, of course, much poorer than us. But it's not the kind of crushing poverty that you see, for example, in countries like India or Nepal. Sri Lanka is warm. Nobody dies of hunger. Nobody dies of cold, sorry. You don't need a lot to get by. The food is cheap, the electricity is cheap, you don't need a car, you need a few items of clothing, and you're set for the whole year. They're very, very connected to their families. They live in large households, with their uncles and their grandparents. And nobody really experiences the kind of deprivation that you experience in other parts of the world that are less fortunate in that area. And so the people by themselves are then not that hard. I mean, they're softer, they're gentler, and easier to get along with.
Yes, it does.
They're always on social media. They're very familiar with movies, with music, with culture. And Europe for them, they may never have been here physically, but it's not a foreign concept to them. When they come, they fit in very well.
Well, it's fascinating to me. Even Serbia is, as you said, relatively familiar to them.
It's very familiar. And even more so every day, because you have a very large community of Sri Lankans here, and more coming every day. And as I said, they're very active in groups, in social media. So, for example, one curious thing that I noticed, and I hear this from my partners in Serbia, is when people are from Sri Lanka arrive, there's always somebody carrying a package for somebody. So these are people who are working in completely different companies, people who are from completely different parts of Sri Lanka, who have absolutely no way of knowing each other. They have nothing in common, but somehow they manage to find out that some guy is coming on whatever date, and he's bringing a parcel from the family member of somebody who's already in Serbia, and they meet at the airport and take it. So they're very well connected, they're very well integrated amongst each other, and Serbia is very familiar to them.
How is their integration into Serbia going?
Excellent, excellent. I think the culture is more and more familiar to them, and most importantly, they're very well received. So there's very few. I mean, even to say very few is an exaggeration. There's hardly any problems with people being unfriendly to them, with Serbian people being unfriendly to them on account of their skin color or their nationality.
What kind of employment are they seeking, and are they seeking to actually remain in Serbia or Europe?
The vast majority of them are planning to stay in Serbia, and the jobs that they're looking for right now, the jobs that they're being hired for, are mostly the kind of entry-level jobs that Serbian people don't want to do anymore. For example, working in restaurants as a kitchen staff. So it can be as kitchen assistants, dishwashers, all the way to chefs and cooks. It can be in manufacturing, working in factories, working as carpenters. In the construction sector, I mean, which is booming here, every profession is required. It can be as tailors, it can be as gardeners, it can be absolutely anything that you can imagine. The cutoff seems to come more or less where the highly specialized and highly skilled jobs are. So, for example, we don't have any requirements for programmers, for managers, we've even had a few requirements for engineers, but mostly, it's jobs below that level.
In terms of the, cultural differences and adaptation and things like that, obviously they don't speak Serbian.
Yeah.
At the beginning, at least, because I understand some of them are actually getting quite proficient with Serbian.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, are there some cultural differences that really should be taken note of, both from the Sri Lankan side and from the Serbian side?
I mean, the cultural differences are, of course, vast. I mean, it's a very different culture than the one that we're used to. One important thing to note about people from Sri Lanka is that they're very respectful of the local culture. So you don't have situations, for example, I think one of the main problems with immigrants in the West is that they go to a country and they try to make their guest country be like their home country where they came from. I have not seen any kind of tendency from Sri Lanka people to do this. I mean, they're very respectful of our culture and of Serbia, but the cultural differences are vast. And one of the main cultural differences, and I think this is something that's very common in Asia, or at least Southeast Asia, is that people are very reluctant to say no. So, for example, I mean, one thing that I tell employers here is to be very careful when they ask their Sri Lankan hires if they can do something, because very often they will get a response of yes, even though it cannot be done. Maybe the worker doesn't have skill, maybe he doesn't know how to do it, or maybe what he's asking for the employer is asking for is impossible. But they're very reluctant to disappoint their employer. So this is something that people should be wary of. When they speak to their employers. Employees seem to have realistic expectations, and also to have in the back of the mind that people may agree to something that they necessarily may not be able to do. And the biggest difference is food. People from Sri Lanka find it very difficult to adapt to our way of eating. Their diet is mainly based on rice, on curries. They eat very little meat, lots of vegetables, and lots of rice. And we've had situations where we brought large groups of workers for factories, where their accommodation was inside the factory and meals were organized in the factory restaurant. And it was a very difficult time for the people from Sri Lanka, because they don't want to eat sandwiches, they don't want to eat burek or bread rolls or croissants or anything. They want their food. And that is why, when we negotiate with employers, we always try to have a food allowance for workers, that the employers can give them 100, 150 euros per month, and make sure that the accommodation where they're putting the Sri Lankans up has a kitchen, so they can take care of their own food. But apart from that, I mean, I'm sure there's many things that are different, but it's nothing different in terms of cultures, but it's nothing that should really concern the people who are hiring them. You don't notice it. I mean, they have their own language, their own beliefs, but they're not in any way trying to bring them, into your office or impose them on you.
That's fascinating, because I get a picture of people that are hardworking and resilient, and yet very adaptable,
Yes.
very really ready to cooperate.
They're very cooperative. I think this is an excellent term for people from Sri Lanka. Thank you, cooperative. They're very cooperative. They're very easy to get along with. They're not aggressive, and it's very easy to find a common language with them.
The only downside, as you said, is they're reluctant to say no, and I guess in order to be better employees, you sometimes have to say, how it is.
Yes, because this sometimes leads to bigger problems
Down the road.
down the road. So, for example, we've had situations where workers left their employers, where they could have just stayed and asked for a bigger salary. And the employer would have been happy to give them a bigger salary, but nobody ever asked. Because they are hesitant to get into these conflict-like situations. For them, it's a bit stressful, and they don't like this. They prefer to avoid it. So, on the one hand, this is a positive side, because you will not get into arguments with them. On the other hand, it can be a bit of a drawback, because sometimes there's an easy fix for a problem that is quite minor, but that you may not be aware of because nobody will raise it.
I guess we tend to be a lot more confrontational in comparison to Sri Lankans, obviously. So I guess that we're used to a level of, back and forth, push and pull. So I guess that they should have an idea, what to expect in that regard.
When we are sending workers from Sri Lanka to Serbia, we prepare the workers, exactly as you say, the people in Serbia are more straightforward and they expect to be told if there's a misunderstanding. We also spend a lot of time giving suggestions to the employer who's going to be receiving the workers, that he should not be surprised that we, as the agents from Sri Lanka, contact them on behalf of the workers. Because what happens sometimes is that the worker is, for example, not happy with the accommodation, or he's not happy with some aspect of his work. He doesn't go to the employer. He calls us in Sri Lanka, and then we call the employer. And in Sri Lanka, this is something completely normal. I mean, as much as we try to stress that people in Serbia should expect a straightforward communication, you cannot change a culture that has been part of them for centuries, and for all their lives. And then, the employers are sometimes surprised. And, people in Serbia sometimes react, not angrily, but in a bit of annoyed, as like, why didn't he just tell me himself? This, I think, is an important cultural difference, but we tell the employer, hey, just so you know, don't be surprised if I call you, on behalf of the workers with something they're not happy with, because they're hesitant to tell you. They will tell me and I will tell you, and this is completely normal. It's not that they're hiding something from you or going behind your back, it's just the way it works. It's a different mindset.
It seems to me very precious that you are, so to say, in both worlds.
Yeah.
You have an insight into Serbs and you have an insight into Sri Lankans, and that makes you an ideal for this kind of work.
But the thing is, it's a two-way street. The only reason why everything works is because the employers from Serbia want to hire a person from Sri Lanka, and on the whole, they're very happy with the person who comes. The person who comes from Sri Lanka wants to go to Serbia, and when he arrives, when he starts working here, when he's welcomed into our country, he's very happy with the reception he receives. And then any kind of misunderstanding, any bumps along the road are very easily smoothed over, because on the whole, everything is good. The goodwill is there from both sides.
Tell me from the technical side, how good are Sri Lankans with English?
Quite good. Sri Lanka was a British colony for centuries, Ceylon. So their English is kind of it's not the official language, but it's the service language. There are people who don't speak English, of course. When they come to Serbia, even that has not been a problem, because technology has progressed now that everybody has Google Translate or ChatGPT, and everybody speaks into their phone, it translates it into Serbian. There hasn't been one complaint that is difficult to communicate. Everybody has found a way.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Just for the sake of the full information, can you just very briefly, guide us through the recruitment process, how you do it in Sri Lanka with your employment agency there?
The process is quite straightforward. and I have to give great credit to whoever designed the system in Serbia because it functions very well. It's quite straightforward, it's very transparent, and it's easy to get through it. The process starts when we get a request from a Serbian company that they would like to hire a worker here from Sri Lanka. We get a specification of what it is that they're looking for, what are the qualifications of the candidate should be, what are the job conditions, what the job is, the working hours, etc. The one thing that I have to be very clear about is that the legal protection from Sri Lankan workers is very high, very important in Sri Lanka. So Sri Lanka has the Sri Lankan Bureau of Foreign Employment that we, as all of us who have agencies in Sri Lanka, are beholden to. And it's very difficult to get a license. And all our processes are very checked, and the workers always have, a possibility to complain to this bureau and get help from them. So it's very important for us to make sure that the places where the workers are going are places where the workers are not going to have problems. So both on a moral side, we stay away from problematic employers. After some time in the business, you already speaking on the phone, you know where you're going to have trouble and you know where things are going to go smoothly. Especially, if you go to meetings, the moment you enter a company, you absolutely feel the energy and you know if this is the place where you should stay or it's not. And the thing is, we're dealing with people, and all of these people, they lead their lives, they lead their children, their wives, their parents, they travel to a faraway country, and it's absolutely inexcusable for me to send them to a place where they're not going to get what they were looking for. And slight digression there. So we get our requirements from the Serbian employer. We look for candidates in Sri Lanka. We pass these candidates in the forms of their CVs and videos. So for example, for skilled workers, we always have a video of him working. So for example, if it's a chef, it'll be him working in a kitchen. If it's a construction worker, him doing something related to his construction profession, so that the employer in Serbia can see that this guy actually knows what he's supposed to be doing. So we provide several candidates, the Serbian employer chooses who he wants, and he provides us with an offer letter. So this is a kind of confirmation that the worker in Sri Lanka has a job in Serbia, where it precisely outlines what his job is, what his salary is, what his working times are, what his holidays are, and what he can expect when he goes to Serbia. After this is complete, we apply through the government portal. It's called welcome-to-serbia.gov. And after that, the employer goes through some vetting with the local police, the Uprava za strance, the foreign department for foreigners, who either approve or refuse the visa. After the visa is approved, we go to Delhi to pick up the visa from the embassy, and the worker is free to travel to Serbia and start his employment. What's very important to understand is that people cannot just come to Serbia. So to be able to come to Serbia, you need to have a job. You need to have an offer for an employment. It needs to be in a reputable company. So it's all the companies who hire workers, they need to explain why they're hiring a guy from Sri Lanka or Nepal or India. So you cannot come to a situation where you open a company yesterday and tomorrow you want to import 20 guys from Nepal. You need to explain, you need to have Serbian workers, you need to have a company that works. When you go to the police, you need to explain why you want this guy from Sri Lanka, why you need this guy from Sri Lanka. Once they come also, they have to be registered like our Serbian workers. They have to be registered in Kosovo, they have to have their benefits paid, their medical insurance paid, all the taxes paid. And there's no benefits for the Sri Lankan worker in relation to the Serbian worker. So for example, some of the questions that we got from employers is like, hey, do we have to pay the benefits less, or why do we have to pay medical insurance or social security because this guy's not going to retire here? You have to pay it. So the expenses are absolutely the same for the foreign worker and for the Serbian worker. There is no difference there.
Thank you. Ovo je bilo savršeno. Što se prebacimo na srpski, da pređemo neke, ja mislim imaš izuzetno interesantne stvari koje se baš onako tiču i srpskih poslodavaca i generalno za srpsku publiku, prosto da da kako da kažem, imaju ideju i ko su ti ljudi iz Šri Lanke i šta oni žele.
Da.
I kako da kažem i da, oni nisu apsolutno nikakva pretnja ni u kom smislu i tako dalje. Ono što je meni recimo zanimljivo za početak da ovako na srpskom da obratimo je pitanje kulture, pitanje ponašanja, pitanje adaptacije tih ljudi koji dolaze ovde. Šta možeš tu da nam kažeš? Kakvi su ti ljudi? Kako se oni ponašaju? Kako su oni, mislim, kako su do sada iskustva sa njima?
Iskustva su fantastične, u jednoj reči. Jako su dobro prihvaćeni i oni su se pokazali kao jako dobri gosti. Nikakvih pritužbi nisam čuo ni za jednog radnika. Moram da priznam da ja kada su mi prvi radnici, kada smo ih stali sa Šri Lanke, nisam znao kako će to biti primjer i kako će ljudi da reaguju na njih.
U smislu i poslodavaca kako će da reaguju i prosto, da kažem,
okruženje. Za poslodavce nisam imao toliko brige, zato što poslodavci su ti koji su izrazili želju da ih dovedu. Znači, nismo mi kontaktirali te poslodavce, poslodavci su kontaktirali nas, naše lance. Ali vi ne znate kako će kolektiv ih primiti. Međutim, ja moram da vam kažem da u svim slučajevima koje su ljudi dolazili, fantastično su primljeni. Recimo, znam da, pošto su naši Lanci stalno topli, oni nemaju zimsku garderobu. I ljudi su dolazili sa Šri Lanke, recimo, u septembru, oktobru, novembru, decembru, januaru, februaru, i oni dođu u majica. Nemaju zimsku garderobu. Dođu ili možda nekom takvom duksu, eventualno. I onda znam mnogo slučajeva gde su se njihove kolege u fabrikama, znači naši Srbi, skupljali svoju staru garderobu ili skupljali novac da im kupuju zimske čizme, zimska odela, išli tamo, kupovali im Kineza, zimske jakne. Jako su ih lepo primili. Nekako su ih stvarno primili kao članova porodice koje dugo nisu videli. Mislim, što mi je jako drago. Mislim, prvo zbog tih ljudi koji dolaze sa Šri Lanke, ali drago mi je da sam nekako kao deo te nacije da su ljudi toliko lepo primaju ljudi koji su toliko različiti od njih.
To baš mi je lepo, malo mi krenulo je suze.
Ne?
Znači, pa ne, fenomenalna mi je priča. Znači, kako se zove, evo, baš smo imali i prethodnog gosta, baš je pričao kako smo mi, u suštini, jako gostoljubivi.
Jeste.
Mi smo ćoškasti na svoj način i ima tu i kod nas možda i nekog viška agresivnosti i tako dalje, ali u principu ima te i srdačnosti. Mislim, to mi je lepo baš da vidim.
Ima toga, ali mislim da, i to mogu i samog sebe da okrivim za to, da mi kao Srbi imamo najgore mišljenje o sebi. I mislim da, recimo, ti problemi koji su toliko endemski u drugim delovima sveta, pogotovo, recimo, rasizam. Ovde, mislim da mi imamo sliku da je mnogo više rasizma nego što da stvarno. Znam ljudi koji su meni dolazili kao prijatelji iz inostranstva, jer nikada nisam čuo da je neko imao problem. Zato što je bio Afrikanac, zato što je bio tamnije kože, zato što je bio iz jugoistočne Azije, toga ne.
A baš kada pričamo o Šri Lančanima i sve to pomenuo si, znači, taj nivo obrazovanja i u principu ipak, da kažem, i nivo urednosti i tu pitomost.
Jeste. Prvo što se tiče obrazovanja. Šri Lanka ima jednu od najviših stopa pismenosti na svetu. Što se tiče urednosti, ja znam razne kandidate koji bi mi slali po restoranima, da li to da budu kuvari, pomoćni kuvari. To su neki momci, recimo, i devojke koji nisu imali iskustva. Niko se nikad nije žalio da ne može da ih nauči da operu ruke, da, nose kapu. Nikakav komentar nikad nisam. Znači, apsolutno nema nikakvih kulturoloških problema sa njihovim viđenjem onoga što misle da je red i naše, ono što misle da je apsolutno ne.
A čisto i da napomenemo, radi se o stotinama i stotinama
koji su došli samo preko koje je moja agencija za Živanke poslala.
Znači ima i drugi.
Ima i drugi.
Prosto se radi o tome da smo u principu, eto sad da se mi našli u toj situaciji da smo, eto, mi postali odjednom destinacija gde se dolazi na rad i koja zahteva prosto zaposlene.
Jeste.
Neophodni su, kao što si rekao, da nisu apsolutno neophodni, pa ljudi ih ne bi...
Mnogo je lakše zaposliti našeg čoveka nego čoveka iz inostranstva. Mislim, to je neuporedivo. I niko ne bi dolazio uopšte na ideju da zaposli nekog iz inostranstva, da može lako da zaposli osobu iz Srbije. Nema šanse.
Postoji ta priča da se uzimaju poslovi, da stranci uzimaju poslove domaćima. Tako da, prosto, eto, molite da prokomentarišeš to, sada za kraj, pošto mi se to čini kao izuzetno interesantno pitanje.
Bude konkurs, ne javi se niko. Ili imate konkurse, znam isto naše klijente, koji su došli do toga da na svoje fabrike koje se vide sa autoputa kače ogromne panoje. Tražimo radnike, pozovite nas. Niko se ne javi. Ljudi jednostavno neće da rade u proizvodnji, neće da rade te poslove koji su neprijatni, koji su ili prljavi, znači da se ispijete, da radite u prašini, da radite u magazinu, da radite u fabrici, ili da radite te neke poslove koji su nekomfortni.
A što znači da mi imamo taj standard koji je u stanju da izdrži to da naši ljudi ne rade te poslove i da treba da se ljudi sa strane zaposle i to je to. To je jednostavno, to je ta razvijenost. Mislim, meni je to nekako logično gledajući sve druge primere iz inostranstva i tako dalje. Prosto rade se o tome, imaju ljudi više para, prosto ne žele da rade neke stvari i to ja u potpunosti razumem.
Da.
Ali prosto sa time ide da će doći strani radnici koji će raditi te poslove, ali inače ne bi cela ekonomija stala.
Jest.
Što niko ne želi, naravno.
Jest, naravno.
I to je neka nužnost koja prosto ide sa sobom. Znači, ali ono što je meni bilo bitno jeste ta napomena. Znači, ti ljudi, pogotovo ljudi koji dolaze iz Šri Lanke, pogotovo ljudi za koje ti znaš i tako dalje, oni ne dolaze ovde da bi, kako se zove, živjeli na tuđ račun.
Ne.
Oni rade.
Oni jedino kako mogu da dođu je zato što je bio obezbeđeno radno mesto. I ne samo to, nego oni ovde dolaze da bi izdržavali svoje porodice. Znači, oni ne mogu da priušte sebi da dođu ovde i da ne rade ništa. Njih je nešto nateralo da ostave ceo svoj život koji su imali i da dođu negde daleko i nepoznato. I oni to ne bi radili da nemaju ogromnu potrebu da nekome pomogu kući. Znači, on ne može da dođe ovde i da ne radi ništa i da razmišlja samo o sebi šta će da ruča, šta će da večera. Za 99% njih, oni imaju cele porodice, proširene porodice koje oni izdržavaju. Plus, skoro svi oni uzimaju kredite. Znači, vi imate tamo specijalizovane državne kredite koji im pomažu da dođu, da uopšte plate sve te troškove koji su deo njihovog puta do Srbije. Oni moraju da rade da bi to vratili. Znači, to da oni mogu da dođu ovde i da žive od milostinje ili na tuđi račun ili od socijalne pomoći, apsolutno ne postoji prilika. Znači, ja znam, evo, od mojih klijenata sa Šri Lanke, od mojih radnika koje smo mi stali, koliki je njima problem, mislim, ne mesec dana da se ne radi, nedelju dana. Da on ima nedelju dana pauzu za koju neće biti plaćen kad ima egzistencijalni problem. Tako da to apsolutno nije suvisno pričati o tome.
Yes. And for wrapping up, where do you see Sri Lanka in 5, 10, 15 years, Serbia in 5, 10, 15 years, particularly in terms of this employment transfer and things like that?
Well, I think that we're going to be having more and more foreign workers in Serbia. Maybe 4, 5, 7 years ago, it was enough for them just to arrive in Serbia and get for anything. Now, they're also expecting to be happy here. So, for example, we have companies where they're not paid well, but they are very well received. They're having a good time at work. It's young guys who are laughing with their colleagues while baking bread and making bread rolls. They're paid, relatively little in comparison to what other jobs would be. Nobody's leaving this job. Everybody's going there. There's 15 guys from our agency who went there, and they all love it there because they're happy. On the other hand, we've had places where employees were quite well paid, and they left. They don't want to do it because it's not a pleasant working environment. So this is something that I think is important to keep for the future, is that the people who come, they also want to be happy.
So the trend will continue?
In my opinion, yes. And in my opinion, I think it's accelerating because I see for example, the demand that we have now in comparison to the demand we had like 3 or 4 years ago when I just started. It's much different.
Well, that's good to hear about Serbia, because obviously that means that Serbia is economically prospering. I'm kind of sad to hear about Sri Lanka.
Yeah.
But then again, the money they receive will be well invested back home. So
I hope so.
And obviously, it's a sign of them having a greater standard. If they're looking not just to make money, but to have some quality.
Yeah.
So that's good. That means everybody is, well, hopefully that everybody is prospering.
Yeah.
That would be the best solution. And, that's only one can hope for.
I think so. And I mean, I really hope for, because I know how hard it is for them to leave everything they have back home. And it's very far off. We have people, for example, who go home once every 2 years. So can you imagine, you have an 8-year-old child and you go back and you see him next time when he's 10. And it's a great sacrifice. It's a great sacrifice, not just for the person coming, but for the whole family. Not in the sense, that they're without their loved one who's in Serbia, but also because in many cases it's a family affair to raise the necessary amount of money to send, one of your sons or brothers or sisters to Serbia. And I really hope, that, we do everything we can to make sure that they're as happy as they can be here, and, to make their transition as easy as possible.
Thank you so much for being our guest. I mean, it was truly an education.
My pleasure.
And, just continue the good work. And, frankly, I've heard a lot of things that I never even dreamed of. So what can I say? At the end of it, I, hope that everybody gets something from this.
Thank you. Thank you. It was a real pleasure speaking to you today.